Hey, everybody, we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute Radio. We are pleased to bring you some of my students from the past who have gone on to do some very interesting things in life. And tonight, we have with us somebody that a lot of you from Lenawee Christian School know, a lot of you from Nashville, Tennessee know, and that's Taylor Sorensen. We're really glad, Taylor, for you to join us here tonight. And sporting the Michigan colors. Yeah, I see that. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little bio, press out Michigan if you'd like. Feel free.
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that. I was a student at LCS where you taught years ago. So proudly a supporter of the Maize and Blue, and moved down to Nashville around 2000 and have been practically here ever since.
Nice.
And moved here to pursue a career in music.
Nice.
It's led me a lot of different directions. So
you have an awful lot of followers. We've got a bunch of comments here from Jeff Jameson, who wants to suggest that LCS Blue should go. So yeah, and here's one from Kevin. There you go. And
Cam is an Ohio fan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna hide that comment then.
Yeah.
So, I've always been interested in your talent ever since those classes. When I would look at you in the back of the room and say, Taylor, there's a song in there somewhere. Whenever we were doing some teaching. And that was kind of the catalyst, at least for me. And you've gone on to cut records. So why don't you tell some folks about the kinds of things that you've done down there in Nashville?
Well, I early on in my career here, in around 2003 or something like that, just after I graduated college, I signed a record deal right out of college to a little label called Rocket Town.
Nice.
Had released what we called a solo record, so it was just under my name, Taylor Sorensen. That happened to be around a pretty terrible time to get a record deal, because that's right around when Napster started doing that whole thing, and the origins of streaming and all that kind of stuff that really took a toll on what was the traditional record deal and the traditional record industry. So I kind of got into the game late as far as the social media thing and sort of running your own ship as an independent artist.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of 2020 hindsight kind of stuff. But I did the best I could to move forward. And I started a band called the Trigger Code. And long story short, everybody kind of went their separate ways after a while, but I kept using that as the moniker for essentially the vessel for my songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's kind of how it all got started. It wasn't really necessarily like a group of guys getting together, sort of collaborating and writing the stuff together. It was always, I wrote these songs, I brought them to a specific group of guys, and then we sort of produced it from there. But as those guys started moving on and doing their own things, separate things, I continued to write, but just kept operating under that name, the Trigger Code. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I landed a deal through a friend of mine, actually, he was, we still go to church together, but he's the president of a label called Dual Tone Records. And back when I signed the deal, they were really at the forefront of what's called sync licensing, which is music in TV and film. So there was this transition of probably around 2008 where TV and film, rather than using someone to write an entire score or the same person who's doing this entire soundtrack or the background music for a TV show, Grey's Anatomy is really who gets credit for a lot of it. They started using songs that other people were familiar with by different artists, and piecing them together throughout the shows. And that started to become really, really popular around 2008, 2009. And now it's kind of all over the place. Instead of hearing these sort of obscure, unknown scores or the settings for the scene musically, you hear artists and bands in the background and montages that are using the Rolling Stones, or even stuff that might not be familiar at all, but could be a really good placement for someone like me.
You actually had one placed in a television show, as I recall. One of your songs, in fact, one of my favorite songs, though at the moment I can't remember the title of it. Do you recall which one that was? What the first?
I mean, there's honestly been a lot. From the biggest one was this song I wrote called "The Fugitive Kind."
That's right.
It was used for the opening. Season opener of season 4 or 5, I think, of Shameless. It was the opening scene, which was a 2-minute montage, no dialogue. So all you saw, it was essentially a 2-minute music video featuring my music. So that's gotten me more exposure than anything by far. It was also used in the trailer for the first season of True Detective.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because that song took about 30 minutes to record. It's 3 vocals, an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, a tambourine, and a filing cabinet. That's literally the filing cabinet and the tambourine are the percussion. And it was one of those, I liked it, but I didn't think that, to that scale. And the first time my wife heard it, she's like, "Oh, that'll be the one." Sure enough. So figures the one I put 30 minutes into is the one that does it. So
that's funny. Well, let me just read some of the comments here. Kevin is mentioning you a number of times. Cammie Court is on. Jeff Jameson, your sister, of course, is here with us.
Hey, sis.
Yeah. And here's just this one from Kevin. I get a kick out of this one. Love the filing cabinet story every time I hear it. So, yeah, you guys got some history.
Crowd pleaser.
That's good. Well, you mentioned your wife, and I know that you've got some children running around down there. Tell us about parenting.
That's what got me into this room at the very last minute. Yeah, I've got 3 boys. One's almost 7. The other one's 4.5. The other one is, I lose track, 16, 17 months. So
nice.
Full on.
Congratulations, yeah.
Full on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my wife's she just got home, which is part of the reason that I walked into this room when I did. But she's a nurse, but she's in pediatrics, which hasn't been terribly busy or anything. Like, for the most part, it's actually been pretty slow. Okay. Yeah, that's a real quick nutshell.
Have you written any songs about parenting?
Um, Not, I wouldn't say directly. There's some stories in the last record that I did. That
So, yeah, you've written some father-son stuff, haven't you?
yeah. The Father Sons EP, and then the Black Mountain White Lake Volume 1 record. They're full of stories. So they're not, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily about my parenting per se, but it's all of those stories are characters that I made up and gave them their own perspectives,
Nice.
which are all going to be fed by mine and my experience, obviously. But I've kind of approached those characters as attempts to create, give them a set of experiences, create a set of experiences for them, and then say, okay, how would they respond to these things? And so there's a song called Papa that is about a working class father struggling to do that. There's there's a few other references to, like in the song "Swing a Hammer," teaches it's a story about a father who taught his son the importance of trades, using your hands to be able to do work, essentially. Why that's valuable.
You're a living testimony to that. Tell people what you do.
I'm in. It's a kind of a crossover industry, but agricultural services, landscaping, tree services, tree care. So I do a lot of a lot of what I do. I tell people I'm kind of like a do-over guy. I'm not the guy to call if you want some landscape design done, or you want a bunch of stuff planted. I'm the guy who comes in to get it all out so that you can start doing it the way that you want it to. Whether that's, moving some earth, or getting some brush out, getting some trees down, things like that. That's what I do.
Yeah, you're in the trades for sure.
And I'm really fortunate this day and age right now.
Yeah.
Just been extremely busy.
Yeah.
So
you have an awful lot of stuff going on down there that makes you that kind of busy. I had also wanted to kind of pick back up on the song issue again. And you had said to me in a text earlier today, why don't you pick a song that you especially like or want to talk about? And, we've talked a little bit about Fugitive Kind and some of the songs that are the backdrop to this. But frankly, the two things that immediately came to mind were God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. And the second one was that line that you were texting with me a couple weeks ago from Bruce Cockburn, kicking at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. Tell us about why, let's take the Cockburn song first. Why is that such an endearing line to you?
To me, I think that has a lot to do with grace, which is the concept that anytime I'm doubting my faith, there's something about that keeps me coming back. I was just talking with a friend last week about the idea that beautiful things can be made from ugly things, that life can be made from death. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So this idea, you kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight, is just kind of another way to say that to say that idea, I guess. the idea of grace. And I've kind of always been fascinated by even the idea of death being put to death, and what that looks like, and always been frustrated by the way Easter gets treated but in most of our society, as far as the pop side of it, because what's being celebrated and what's actually happened is I mean, you were talking about death defying, literally, and that does not look like pink fluffy bunnies to me. It's, it looks a whole lot more like Sons of Anarchy or something like that. You know?
Very much. Yeah, Hell on Wheels. Pick one of those.
Right.
Pick one of those. And it's one of the things that's always distressed me about Christians generally when they want to put aside some of those very difficult issues. I still remember teaching in the sophomore grades at LCS, and I would show those pictures from the Journal of the American Medical Association of the crucifixion and what that meant and how Jesus died and so on. And the difficulty of that. And I always remember this one thing, that every single time I taught that, one person in every class would faint, dead away, gone. And I would warn them the day before, this has happened every year. Make sure you eat a good lunch.
Was there a parental consent for that one? No, because there was for something in that class, right?
For movies or music or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I was always out on the edge, Well, talk a little bit about this song, and I know this might go back a bit of time for you, but a few years ago at Christmas time, you sent me this rendition that you did of "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." What is it about that song or songs like it that give you once again this earnestness, perhaps, about your faith?
It's I sent it to a lot of people. Hopefully you're okay with that. Honestly, initially the sound of it, it has this, it's the juxtaposition of the lyric and the melody. It's in a minor key, so you're immediately put in sort of a melancholy state. Yet lyrically, it's celebrating something. And so that there's something fascinating about that to me, because it sounds like someone that I'm not sure who wrote it, but whoever did, or however many renditions have been done of it, that's someone to me that has kind of a foot in each place, a foot here and a foot there. Because it's someone who isn't denying the darkness, but also isn't left hopeless.
Right.
That's a lot of the Psalms that I read, and I think that's a really important thing, especially for Christians as we navigate anything in this world, is don't just blinding yourself to the pain, to the darkness, to the hurt isn't really doing any one of us any good.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But wallowing in self-pity or, essentially resorting to hopelessness is just as dangerous.
Sure.
So,
It reminds me to say that 70% of the Psalms are lament.
mm-hmm.
And so if that's true, then, Bono was right that Psalms are the blues of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Really does get down to it, I think, and matter a lot. I really do appreciate, and I think that's why I resonate so much with your music and the kinds of things that you do, because you're not afraid of the darkness, not afraid to talk about it, sing about it, and live in it, because we all do if we're real honest with ourselves, with each other, and we have to navigate that. So considering where we've gone so far, and considering we just talked about death, one of the things you mentioned to me in a text was that you wanted to explore this concept of resurrection as creativity. And I'd love for you to riff on that and see where that goes.
Yeah, it's a book I talked to you about maybe a couple weeks ago. I'd asked you if you'd ever read Letters to a Diminished Church by Dorothy Sayers. And she's really, really exploring the idea of art as it relates to the church, as it relates to Christians. And it's one of those where I'm having to read paragraphs 4 or 5 times just to start to digest it. But one of her statements, which I thought really, really profound, was that if creativity or creation is the antithesis of it is death, therefore the most creative act in all of human history has to be the resurrection. And she talks very, very matter-of-factly as of Christ as a creative being, and in a sense, an artist, and an artist to the perfect degree. And so that's what landed me on that when you asked me about some topics, and I thought it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on it too.
It reminds me of a sermon I preached for my grandmother's funeral years ago, based on Job 14. And since you're into cutting trees, this will resonate with you. It's from that passage in Job 14 where Job says, if a tree is cut down, is there hope for a tree? And he goes on then to explain that in the spring the shoots will come up and so on. And at the time, actually, and I have some vast experience with tree cutting. My father and I cut 7,000 board feet of black cherry off land that we owned when I was a kid. So that particular summer, actually during the time when the funeral was about to be, and I was going to actually speak at it, we were cutting down a huge tree in a neighbor's yard. And you know how men are, they all congregate around other men that are working, just to watch men work. It's really always kind of fascinated me. And I got a chance to tell that story about Job 14, because that's what it says in verse 7 about the tree. But in verse 14, it comes back and he asks a similar question about, is there any hope for a man? And his comment is, I will wait for my renewal to come. Well, in Hebrew, the word hope in verse 7 and the word renewal in verse 14 are exactly the same word. In other words, Job was looking for the resurrection. He goes on later on in chapter 19 to talk about this, that with his own eyes, he is going to see his Redeemer. That's a very famous passage in Job 19, 23 to 27. But, quite frankly, back to your point, though, about Dorothy Sayers and her concerns about creativity and the resurrection, there is no beauty and there is no hopefulness unless there is hope, unless there's something more than this life, and that's crucially important to us. And I think then that bleeds over into how we view our life and into the songs that you write and sing, and the songs and the television programs that we love to watch, because there's these glimmers of hope in the midst of pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I go with that.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
And I had to get the chainsaw in there too. That was
What's that?
I had to get the chainsaw in there too. The importance of down trees. Well, you had also mentioned, you and I both have talked about our kindness toward the spirits. I have, we're not speaking about the Holy Spirit here. And every once in a while, like last week or 2 weeks ago or something, you flashed me a bottle that was one of your favorites, and we had some conversation about that. It always fascinates me as to what is it about drink that kind of brings people together. I mean, even when I came down to see you in Nashville, it was last year, wasn't it? We sat.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about food and drink that brings us together, that brings people to listen to you in a band at a Friday, Saturday night? What is it about that draws people in, do you think?
That's not, I've thought about it, but I haven't come to much conclusion. I just know that it does that. It's been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, and I'm glad, because I've experienced a lot of good food thanks to it. You might have what do you think?
I think it's important that hospitality is part of what makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, I think it's the very essence of the gospel, Christ inviting us into his home. And there's a reason why his first miracle was water to wine. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why he told his disciples, I'm not going to drink again until I see you. And, this is part of who we are. Even as Christians, I realize there are difficulties with drink, and, read Proverbs 23, everybody out there that's listening. And I lived with an alcoholic father, so I get all of those things. But my point in even suggesting this is there's this draw within the Christian tradition, within hospitality, within homemaking, within food and drink, and even what we're doing right here, you and I right now, as we share time together. I mean, this literally is what we're doing, is sharing our lives, our hospitality, our homes with each other.
Mm-hmm. And is that it's better served by good food?
It is.
And good drink, right?
Good drink. That's right. That's right.
If anything, it says it speaks more to the kindness of the Creator,
mm-hmm.
that these things taste good.
Yes.
That these things are. It doesn't just. It's not just there to sustain,
right,
for sustenance, but that it actually is enjoyable,
right,
in the process.
And it strikes me to say, since you went in that direction, I'm always mindful of that statement in Genesis 2:9 that God made the trees good for food, but also pleasing to the eye. Mm-hmm. There's this aesthetic that goes along with food and drink. And, part of the aesthetic is the olfactory, the smell, the mm-hmm. aroma of it, Robin was cooking pork tonight, and, just that aroma just wafts through the house. It's so mm-hmm. wonderful, good, and it's attractive and pleasing and all of those things. And I think that's something that draws us to beauty that we don't often think about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, I won't get into a ton of detail, but It reminds me of a conversation I had with a church leader years ago, that was having a bit of an issue with how do I say this? There wasn't a ton of lyrical content to the song, but the music is absolutely breathtaking.
Mm.
In my opinion, music that is beautiful, just the music, is just as worshipful.
Sure.
It can be.
Yeah.
I understand that it can be a distraction for some. For me, when I hear this music, when I hear this song,
yeah,
I go to a different place, and it's a worshipful place, you know. So I think that is that same idea that the trees are beautiful as well. That matters.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's even well, what percentage? You know, right. I don't know that that's, the more I learn about God, the more that stuff kind of just gets, percentages and time and things like that kind of get thrown out the window.
One of the things I was talking
about. It's important because he thinks it's important.
Yeah, right. Somebody was asking me the other day about whales breaching and why did I think whales were breaching? And I just read National Geographic, and of course, a naturalist thinks of things quite a bit differently. And I honestly, my response to the whales breaching was they're praising their creator. I think everything does in its own way, and I think the animal kingdom does it much better. I think the vegetative kingdom does it much better than we do. There's a reason why in the Psalms it says that the trees will clap their hands. Maybe there's a sense in which C.S. Lewis was right about some of that stuff, what he wrote about Narnia, and that does matter. I was just to play along with your comments about song and about how music hits you. I was watching again A Star Is Born the other day with Lady Gaga, and
the new one. Okay.
Yeah, the new one. And toward the beginning of the film, he brings her on stage, and he's in front of this packed house supposedly, and she's written this song about the shallows. And I'll tell you, the lyrics are great and I like them, but when she goes low and then goes an octave above that, I mean, when she hits that note, I mean, I started to cry.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It was just so enrapturing to me.
There wasn't a lyric for it. It was only a note that could do it. That's right. Yep.
Oh man. So, back again to you and to what you do. There are so many of us who are so grateful for what you do and the kind of work that you do with singing and songwriting. We want you to continue. Don't stop.
I'm trying. These days, it's really just a matter of time. Yeah. If it were paying the bills, it'd be a little bit different. But I'm grateful for how it is. I've come to accept a lot of reasons for, or at least as far as I can tell, why things have played out the way they have. And even the things I haven't, I still have to trust that it's for my good, and for His glory. Yeah. So,
the difficulty of going through those hard times. I'm always mindful of that famous book, A Man's Search for Meaning, where here's a man who has gone through Auschwitz for 3.5 years and survived, comes out the other side, and his takeaway from his experience is the last thing that anybody can take away from you is the attitude with which you approach any given difficulty. And so ultimately, that can't be taken away from us.
Mm.
How do we respond is the key question, not why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of pain, and there's a lot of questioning, and it's hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, man, thanks so much for the time tonight. I'm grateful for the interview and for sharing this with folks. I know that there's been a whole bunch of folks here. Sherry Arquette is on. Your dad chimed in.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, good interview, sharing a lot of wisdom from your dad there. Sherry says, creates what Scripture says. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And we'll end here with Kevin. Kevin, thanks.
Ohio State fan and all.
So everybody who's listening, this will be archived. You can watch it anytime you'd like. We're grateful for your participation tonight. Amy O'Brien says, hey, Taylor, here's her banner up here real quick. So we're grateful for all of you who joined us. And again, thanks, Taylor, for all of your good work. We continue to follow you and thank the Lord for your good efforts here on earth. And we're looking forward to crossing over to the other side when you join the angelic chorus as well as the angelic orchestra. How's that?
All right. I'll be there.
All right, man. Hey, thanks so much. I look forward to the next time.
All right. Likewise.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.